In the age of myth, long before our histories were written, the land of the elves was a sanctuary of shimmering forests and crystalline rivers. But this peace was not to last. From the shadowed peaks of the Dragon's Tooth Mountains descended the giants, their heavy footfalls shaking the very foundations of the earth. They were beings of raw power, craving dominion over the lush, magical lands of the elves. And they were not alone. With them came the avatars, enigmatic figures who could bend the elements to their will, commanding firestorms and earthquakes as easily as a whisper. The elven sentinels, perched high in the silverwood trees, were the first to sound the alarm. Horns carved from griffin bone echoed through the valleys, a mournful cry that signaled the coming of war. The giants and avatars, a fearsome alliance, expected a swift victory. They saw the elves as delicate, artistic beings, more concerned with song and starlight than with the grim realities of battle. They were wrong, terribly wrong. The conflict that followed would be seared into memory as the Seven-Day War. It began on the plains of whispering grass. The giants charged, their massive clubs and stone axes cleaving the air. The avatars supported them from the rear, raising walls of fire and summoning jagged shards of rock from the ground to block any elven retreat. It was a terrifying display of brute force and elemental fury. The ground trembled, and the sky turned dark with smoke and magical energy. But the elves did not meet them with a direct charge. They were masters of their land, and they used this knowledge with deadly precision. The elven archers, known as the Starfall Rangers, loosed their arrows from hidden positions. These were no ordinary arrows. Each was fletched with phoenix feathers and tipped with light-infused silver, designed to pierce not just flesh, but the very magical essence of their foes. The arrows sang through the air, finding their marks in the weak points of the giant's stony hides. Meanwhile, the elven spellweavers, disciples of the moon and stars, began their own counter-assault. They didn't try to overpower the Avatar's raw elemental force. Instead, they wove intricate webs of illusion and misdirection. They turned the plains into a dizzying maze of shifting landscapes. A charging giant would suddenly find itself running towards a cliff that wasn't there a moment before. An avatar calling down a lightning strike would see it dissipate harmlessly into a phantom forest. The elves were turning their enemy's strength against them, using agility and intellect to combat raw power. The first day ended in a stalemate, but the invaders were confused and frustrated. On the second day, the battle shifted to the Gloomwood, a dense forest where sunlight struggled to reach the floor. This was elven territory, and here their advantage grew. The giants, clumsy and large, found themselves entangled in ancient vines that seemed to move with a life of their own. The forest floor was a treacherous tapestry of snares and pitfalls, laid with centuries of expertise. Elven warriors, clad in armor like shimmering leaves, moved like ghosts through the undergrowth, striking with swift, silent grace before melting back into the shadows. They fought a war of 1,000 cuts, wearing down the giants' immense stamina. The avatars, however, were more dangerous here. They began to corrupt the forest itself, turning the ancient trees against their protectors. Twisted, thorny branches lashed out, and the very roots of the gloomwood sought to ensnare the elven fighters. It was a dark and terrible magic, a violation of the natural order, for a moment. It seemed the elves might falter. Their connection to the forest was a source of strength, but now it was being used as a weapon against them. But the High Lore Master of the Elves, a sage named Lyra, had anticipated this. On the third day, she led the spellweavers to the Heartwood, the most ancient tree in the forest. Here, they performed a ritual of cleansing. They didn't fight the Avatar's magic. They healed it, pouring their own life force into the Heartwood. They reminded the forest of its true nature. The corrupted trees shed their dark magic like a snake sheds its skin. The Gloomwood awoke, and now it fought with the elves. The ground itself seemed to guide the elven warriors while hindering the invaders. The forest had chosen its side. Frustrated by their lack of progress, the invaders retreated from the forest on the fourth day and laid siege to the elven city of Silverwood, a breathtaking metropolis built among the branches of colossal ancient trees. Connected by bridges of woven light, the giants hurled massive boulders, while the avatars assaulted the city's magical wards with relentless spells. The beautiful bridges flickered and shattered, and parts of the city caught fire. The elven defenses were strong, but the onslaught was overwhelming. This was the elves' darkest hour. The siege continued through the fifth day, supplies dwindled, and the defenders grew weary. It was then that the elven queen, Alarielle, made a bold decision. The elves had a secret weapon, a final resort they had sworn never to use. Deep beneath the city lay the sunken grotto, where ancient spirits of light and water slumbered. To awaken them was to unleash a power that could not be easily controlled, a power that could reshape the land itself. On the morning of the sixth day, as the final assault began, Queen Alarielle descended into the grotto. With a song of sorrow and desperate hope, she offered a piece of her own immortal life to the spirits. The grotto began to glow with an impossibly bright golden light. Water erupted from the ground, not as a destructive flood, but as a host of powerful river spirits and shimmering water elementals. They swarmed out of the city, crashing into the besieging army like a tidal wave of pure magic. The giants, creatures of earth and stone, were helpless against the fluid, relentless power of the water spirits. The avatars found their fire magic extinguished and their earth magic washed away. The river spirits flowed around their magical shields, eroding their power from within. The entire battlefield was transformed into a swirling torrent of magical water and avenging nature. The invaders, who had sought to dominate the land, were now being consumed by it. The seventh and final day was not a battle, but a reckoning. The remaining giants and avatars, their alliance broken and their spirits crushed, attempted to flee back to the mountains, but the elves gave them no quarter. The Starfall Rangers hunted them from the skies, their silver-tipped arrows ensuring none would escape to threaten their home again. The Gloomwood itself seemed too close behind them, its paths twisting and turning, leading the fugitives into dead ends where elven warriors waited. The avatars, stripped of their elemental allies, were captured by the spellweavers, their powers bound by ancient elven runes. When the sun set on the seventh day, silence fell over the land of the elves. The war was over. The cost had been great. Parts of Silverwood were in ruins, and many brave elves had fallen. But they had held. They had proven that grace is not weakness, and that deep knowledge of one's home is a power greater than any brute force. The land itself had fought alongside them. The giants were no more, and the avatars were imprisoned in crystals deep beneath the earth, their elemental rage silenced forever. The elves began to rebuild, their songs now carrying a note of sorrow, but also one of unbreakable strength and victory. And the legend of the 7-Day War became a warning to any who would ever again dare to underestimate the children of the forest and stars. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into fantasy lore, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales from forgotten ages. See you next time.